my spleen!
3.7 million. That's how many videos are uploaded to YouTube every day. I doubt most people even watch that many YouTube videos in their entire life. There's an endless garden of videos on this website, and almost any kind of content you can think of exists. And if it doesn't now, someone will eventually step in and make it happen. Out of every channel on YouTube, every person that is uploading or has ever uploaded videos, who would you say is your favorite? I know mine, a little channel called ClassicsOfGame. Classics of Game is a YouTube channel created in 2011 dedicated to short clips of strange or funny moments from games. These clips are often anywhere from a minute long to just a few seconds, and are often from really weird or obscure games. There's this clip about a penguin collecting hair gel, or this clip with these weird dancing lizards, or this monkey in a black void. I don't know a whole lot about the person behind the account, but I don't really care. That really isn't important, and the personality of the channel still shines through even without a face. I really recommend just pausing the video right now and watching some of these videos. They're all great. Seriously, come back, I'll wait. I told you that would be great. Now stick around, we're gonna review those games you saw. Some of them, at least. There's almost 200, so I probably won't get to one of the ones you watched in this video today. But I will eventually, and it all starts here. Before we begin, I need to lay out some ground rules. I've broken up all the clips into their upload years. Following that, I've further split up the years into chunks of 10 to 15 games. Originally, I was going to go year by year, with the exception of breaking down the longer years into 2 parts. But after my first YouTube video turned out to be 30 minutes long and it was only about 4 games, I decided I'd split things up a little further to avoid things getting too long. Hopefully I can make the videos more frequently this way as well. Also, to save some time, I won't be trying to beat every game. I'll be playing from anywhere from an hour to 5 hours, and hopefully that'll be enough to get a feel for the game without having to go through an entire game's worth of content. If a game is 2-player, I'll attempt to play it with friends in order to get that side of the experience too. There's a few exceptions to this when I deem a game too bad or too boring to subject my poor friends to it. If a game is multi-platform, I'll try to play on the platform used in that clip. Finally, before we begin, I'd like to ask 2 things. If anyone watching this has any way to get a ROM of the Mario-themed Squirrel King bootleg in Classics of Game 45, please let me know in the comments. I can't find that ROM online anywhere, so I'd love to get in touch with you. Also, if anyone knows what specific version of Death Sword is in Classics of Game 63, please leave it in the comments. Anyway, without further ado, here we go. Our first game is... Okay, wait. Stick with me. I promise it's gonna get more interesting. Don't leave. For me, Beyblade has always been just another one of those 90s, 2000s battle toy franchises. I was more partial to Bakugan and Pokemon as a kid. Those simple tops seem so pedestrian in comparison to the strange creatures of Pokemon or the cool dragons of Bakugan. And no, I didn't care that dragons and monsters and stuff came out of the tops in the TV show. The actual toy is just a metal top with a launcher. At most, Beyblade was relegated to conversations about how weird the anime was. Like, remember when Moses parted the Red Sea with a Beyblade? So I have to admit, I'm very unfamiliar with the source material of the game. I'm actually surprised to see a Beyblade game on the PS1. I didn't think it was that old. The PS1 Beyblade game was published by Takara and developed by WaveEdge, one of their subsidiaries. Fun little fact about Takara, they're the main manufacturer for Transformers in Japan, and also made the Diaclone toy line that inspired Transformers. As for WaveEdge, they were formed in 1990 and mainly stuck to developing games based on Takara IPs. Although according to Moby Games, they did help on the development for Super Robot Wars Compact and Wonder Swan, which is kinda neat. They only existed for a brief moment, closing in 2001 during a restructuring of Takara. The game got mediocre to bad reviews from critics, a few of which mention it's bad even for budget game standards, as this game apparently only retailed for $20. Also, this random internet review I found called it the manifestation of hell, along with an agony that not even torture could dish out. Jesus Christ, a Beyblade game can't be that bad, can it? As expected for a game of such critical reception, it barely made a splash online. I can't find the manual anywhere, so that's annoying. All I could find was a brief list of controls on the website PSX Data Center. With that all out of the way, on to the game. The game starts with the opening to the anime, which is a pretty nice touch. The title screen looks pretty cool too. Once you start a new game, you pick your gender and name. I thought the character designs for both the boy and the girl were neat, so I left it up to chance. You also get to choose your first Beyblade. The music here is nice, and the menus are decent enough. Not exactly a bad first impression. The actual gameplay is kind of boring honestly though. You launch your Beyblade like a swing in a golf game, and then you can affect its direction with the D-pad. Supposedly there's special attacks you can do with the face buttons, but I presumably never got the equipment for this with my tournament character, and none of the moves seem to work with the free play characters either. Maybe it's a skill issue, but I never quite got the hang of this game. At the same time, I wasn't exactly motivated to stick around and play more than my minimum required hour. Sometimes I'd win without touching anything though, which was pretty funny. I got a little excited when I saw the customize option in the menu. There's actually quite a nice range of options here, along with detailed stats and this little stats triangle. Unfortunately, it's marred by one thing, the cost in the shop. The cheapest items in the shop will run you 30 Bay points, and some items can be over 100 points. This doesn't seem so bad until you factor in that you only get 10 Bay points for winning a tournament round and 5 for losing, so it'll take forever. I'm at least assuming you get more Bay points the further you get into the tournament, but the thing is, I can never make it past round 2. Maybe I'm just shit at video games, but it's annoying when every time you lose, the game says, oh, you should have upgraded the Beyblade, and yet it barely gives you any points for said upgrades. So my time was almost entirely spent retrying rounds 1 and 2, and this really soured the game for me because I realized the actual gameplay is only in short bursts. First the game loads, then you get the intro to the tournament, then the game loads again, then it counts down from 3 and you get to launch your Beyblade by pressing a single button. Then you have to wait through a cutscene of your Beyblades launching while your character yells silently, and then finally you get like 20 seconds of gameplay. And then you have to watch a little 5-second cutscene for whoever wins, then you launch and do the cutscenes again, and then bam, 20 more seconds. It's very annoying. One thing that was funny at least was that the announcer briefly did the "well" thing like in the Classics of Game video when I started. That was pretty entertaining at least. Well. I like all the character sprites a lot, and the music was pretty good too. Nothing that I'll remember for years on end, but it's nice music. Other than that though, there's not really a whole lot I like about this game. It's typical licensed shovelware fare. It's not the manifestation of hell, or whatever that one guy was yapping about, but I wasn't very entertained. Overall, a very forgettable experience. I wonder why Classics of Game picked this to be first. I feel like a lot of people only really focus on American or Japanese games, especially retro gaming YouTubers. No one really seems to talk about the European side of retro gaming all that much. I think part of the problem is that a lot of the European stuff was on home computers, since those were so much more popular than consoles in Europe. And not a lot of people talk about stuff like the Spectrum or the Amiga, beyond maybe a footnote in the broader history of gaming. Nintendo and PlayStation are mostly what's in right now, I'd say, for retro stuff, so home computer stuff is considerably more niche. But there's a whole wild west of software out there. Theoretically anyone could learn to program and make their own games, so a lot of careers were launched on home computers. A new flood of developers, dubbed the bedroom coders, would break onto the scene in Europe and the UK. Two particular bedroom coders, twins Andrew Oliver and Philip Oliver, rose to particular success with their series Dizzy, about an anthropomorphic egg. Dizzy actually even made his way to home consoles eventually, although he's virtually unknown to us Americans. Or, I don't know, it's the first time I've heard of him at least. With the success of Dizzy and their other games, the twins eventually founded their own studio in 1993 named Interactive Studios, although they'd later renamed the company to Blitz Game Studios. Among their games would be Glover and Pac-Man World 3. Their success began to wane in the 2010s, and in 2013 the company closed. They weren't able to raise money for future projects, and in particular the closure of THQ, a major client, was a big blow to them. It's not an entirely unhappy ending though. The twins almost immediately founded a new studio named Radiant Worlds and rehired many of the former Blitz staff. And as far as I can tell, that company is still going as of the time of this writing. It's nice to cover a developer story that doesn't end in closure like Wave Edge or legal disaster like some of the studios in my shovelware video. But forget about almost all of that and rewind back to the Oliver twins founding their first studio. What game did they develop first with their newfound resources? 1996 saw the release of the isometric shooter Firo and Klawd for the PlayStation. It received truly mixed reviews, ranging from the high 70s to low 50s and even worse. So I truly don't know what to expect from this game. Starting off, the game is an FMV that immediately charmed me. I have to admit, I have a soft spot for 90s game CGI cutscenes, no matter how bad they are. I didn't grow up with them, but something about them is just so uniquely charming to me. I'm a huge fan of stuff like Disillusion or Osamu Sato games. I can't really put it into words, I just really like it. The gist of the plot is that there's this weird looking blue cat, Klawd, and he's an unknowing courier for counterfeit bills. One day he catches on and takes a few for himself. The mob doesn't like that, so when Klawd is at a gun store buying a slingshot, they do history's most excessive drive-by. Luckily, Klawd survives, but unfortunately another customer in the gun store, an orangutan named Firo, is a cop and catches on to Klawd's counterfeit bills. He takes Klawd to the station, only to get chewed out by his boss in typical cop movie fashion. It's on him to clear the counterfeit bills case, so he takes his only lead with him. The cutscene isn't exactly perfect. I'm not going to complain about the animation since I wouldn't expect Pixar qualities of CGI from a random studio in the UK. The voice acting, however, leaves something to be desired. Some of the acting is a little weak. What bothers me more though is how it feels like they animated the cutscene first and then ad-libbed the dialogue around the end result, but only once. It really gives real-time fandub energy in a bad way.
That little black hole spells justice. I'll take it, whatever it costs.
Nice choice, sir. Your family will thank you.
No one will remember you at all. You'll just be known as the boy that made my wall look like shit.
Well, even a bad story is a story people tell each other, sir.
I'm also going to be honest, I really don't like the designs of either protagonist. I like all the other character designs in the game, but Klawd reminds me of a cereal mascot and Firo's boobs are distracting. Once you get into the game, you can choose to play either Firo or Klawd, although you can switch between them in a one-player game by pressing select. A short cutscene plays, and then you're on the streets and the game begins. The first thing I did was gun down this old man, and then I got another drive-by. I had a bit of trouble getting used to the isometric aiming, so a lot of my early gameplay footage is me sucking. I got used to it eventually, although I still don't exactly like it. Sometimes it just wouldn't hit enemies, even when I was sure I should have been hitting them. And it was also just really annoying aiming at enemies on different levels of elevation. It felt random there if my shots would hit or not. One thing I like about the game is the branching paths it has. There's a branch point in the very first level. You can go all the way down to straight to the subway station, or you can cut it off early and go to the bar. My first time around, I wandered into the bar. Some of the levels in this game strip your guns away from you, leaving the two of you with just your fists. One small complaint I have about this is that the sprites are still holding weapons, so the novelty of not being able to use your gun in a bar kind of dries up when Firo just has his whole thing hanging out. Even still, it's fun to literally go ape on the people in this bar. The one problem is that your AI partner seems to be somewhat unwilling to fight. When I went through this level, sometimes I would beat up a few enemies when they got close, but sometimes I just wouldn't fight at all. The only no-gun level I played was pretty easy at the very least, so it's not a big deal, but it's still a little annoying. Aiming problems aside, I found myself liking the gameplay a decent bit. There's some pickups you can get to make things interesting, too. There's extra ammo types you can pick up that allow you to do more damage or fire faster. There's rockets along with separate homing rockets. There are these wanted posters of Firo and Klawd scattered around the levels, and when you collect 10 you get an extra life. There's also medkits that refill your health, pretty standard stuff. And then there's the grenades. The explosion damage RNG is all over the place. Sometimes explosions do 1/3 of your health, sometimes they take it almost all away. Either way, one thing's for certain, I cannot beat this rooftop level in the bar path for the life of me. These mice, the super fast machine guns, were a particular problem for me. I really wasn't sure how to deal with them, although I'm sure I'd eventually figure it out if I put more time into the game. There were also these pistol guys that would take away like half my health with a single hit. A little ridiculous in my opinion, but I guess a counter to that would just be that you're not supposed to get hit. Either way, I found myself going nowhere, so I went back to the drawing board and decided to take the other path. This one takes you through a subway station and onto a train, where you then play the first holdout section. These are first-person shooting gallery segments where you defend yourself until time runs out. They're not brain dead easy, but I never failed the one I ran into either. They're a nice added bit of variety, even if the base gameplay was already pretty good. So how is everything else? I like the pre-rendered look of the graphics, although the environments themselves aren't particularly stand out and things can look a little ugly at times. I hate to sound like a broken record since I feel like I've said this a bunch already, but the music didn't really stand out to me. It's basic, mildly funky beats. Good backing for a city setting, but kind of safe and definitely a far cry from the best of the PS1 soundtracks. Although there is this one part of the bar theme that I really like. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with the game alone, and I was sure it would be even better with a friend. But then we actually played it and we encountered one huge buzzkill. Friendly fire does a ridiculous amount of damage. A little bit of friendly fire damage makes sense. Friendly fire is great for making you consider your moves more carefully. But Jesus Christ, we were taking away almost our entire health bars when we shot each other. I'm also pretty sure everything does double damage in 2-player. Kind of an asinine idea in my opinion. It's a shame too, if it wasn't for that, the 2-player would have been fantastic for this game. In conclusion, Firo and Klawd is a neat little game. I'd recommend it more in single-player mode though. I've actually never seen a Jackie Chan movie. I didn't grow up in the age of Jackie Chan, and as a result, I'm not really familiar with him. So if there's stuff I don't really understand in this game, you know why. Jackie Chan in Fists of Fire is a 1995 arcade fighter by Kaneko. Kaneko developed mostly for the arcade, although they did later branch out to home consoles and handhelds briefly. Kaneko developed another fighting game called Blood Warrior that was featured in Classics of Game 56, so I have to deal with that down the line too. Kaneko first released Fists of Fire as the Kung Fu Master Jackie Chan. Among other small things, the later Fists of Fire revision made Jackie Chan playable, as he was previously only relegated to boss fights. Apparently, Fists of Fire has become a bit of a meme game, I think. I don't really know fighting games that well, so I have no idea if it's a good one, and I can't tell if people online are just joking their appreciation for the game or not. Either way, one thing is for certain, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. I didn't like this one, and that's probably because I don't like Jackie Chan or fighting games. The first point leads into my broader views about the game's aesthetics. I'm not especially in love with Jackie Chan. I know some kind of awful shit about him, so it's kinda hard for me to see him as any kind of hero or icon. Basically, this whole game is kinda just an advertisement for him, so you can imagine it got tiring. He's in the game not just once, but as 3 characters, and from my brief bit of research on this game, I'm pretty sure they're all top tier. Every character, aside from the mysterious Lion, is an actor from a previous Chan movie. They're all digitized Mortal Kombat style, and wow, some of these costumes aren't great. Aside from a few costumes being kind of silly though, the graphics are fine. There's a fine enough number of characters for an initial installment of a fighting game in my opinion, but other than the 3 Jackies, I don't particularly like any of these characters. A real disappointment too, since the character designs are one of the big highlights of fighting games for me. Take the crazy world-spanning cast of Tekken, or the intricate designs of Guilty Gear, or the absolutely classic, iconic designs of Street Fighter characters. And now compare them to Mortal Kombat at home. Yeah, Jackie Chan is the best you're gonna get from this game. No offense to any of these actors, but I don't think I'll remember Mysterious Lion over here like I remember Elfelt. man, you feeling alright, Jackie? None of the music really stood out to me, and none of it was very memorable to me either. I went back and listened to the soundtrack on YouTube, and it's pretty good, but like, there's so much competition when it comes to fighting game soundtracks that is pretty good actually good enough? I don't know. Anyway, I don't really feel like I can talk about the gameplay if that makes any sense. I'm not good at fighting games, and I don't really like playing them either, so I feel like talking about the gameplay wouldn't be very satisfactory. I don't have the fundamentals of fighting games down, so I've never really played them, so I'm constantly whiffing moves. I'm just the wrong person to ask. I like to hop around games too often to stick to a single fighting game enough to get good at it, and besides, I did that once with Guilty Gear Strive and it felt like a chore and I hated it. I figure that, as a concession for me not being good enough at fighting games to discuss gameplay, I'll do something else instead. I'll discuss if, in a hypothetical situation where I decided I wanted to sit down and stick to one fighting game and really learn it, I would pick the particular fighting game I'm reviewing. In this particular case, no, I would not sit down and learn Jackie Chan Fists of Fire. As I said before, the characters and the music aren't very interesting to me. The gameplay just seems kind of like a standard fighting game's gameplay, at least from an outside perspective, and there's no real neat gimmick or anything to draw me in, like a Roman cancel or something. Another thing is that there's no training room of any kind since it's an arcade game. Also, everything does such high damage that matches last barely any time, so it was even harder to get to grips of controls and moves. Eventually, I just resorted to starting up the two-player mode over and over again so I could practice moves while the other fighter didn't do anything. So overall, I don't really think Fists of Fire is worth your time unless you're, I don't know, really into Jackie Chan or something. Oh boy, another genre I'm not really good at. Luckily though, I'm not abysmally bad at racing games like I am at fighting games. Rallycross was a first-party game for the PlayStation 1. It's a racing game based on, of course, Rallycross, mixed-surface car racing. I'm not really a car guy, so I'm not too familiar with motorsports, but honestly, rallying and Rallycross are pretty cool. The fact that these drivers aren't just out to master racing, but that they're also doing it on multiple different surfaces, it's pretty exciting. And of course, it was inevitable a game was going to be made about it. When Sony released Rallycross in 1997, it got very positive reviews by critics. It garnered enough success for a sequel, although there were slightly less positive reviews for this one, praising the track editor, but criticizing the removal of the 4-player mode. All things considered, I was pretty excited going off the reviews, even if the somewhat bare-bones menus don't exactly give the best first impression. And man, this game is fun, even if I'm not good at it. Trying to get used to the slippery turns and learning each course was so fun to me, even if it took me more tries to get first place on a race for the first time than I'd care to admit. But I knew I had to redeem myself after recording that embarrassing Jackie Chan footage, or else they'd take away my gamer license. So I locked in and got first on Oasis. Each race is 4 racers vying for the top spot. There are 6 tracks, although you only start with 3 unlocked. You can, however, choose to go down the tracks backwards as well as forward, which is a nice option. Also, each track has 3 versions to add a little more variety in the single-player progression mode. Said mode is the Seasons mode, which takes you through 6 races and gives you points for how well you do in each. There's 3 difficulties: Rookie, Veteran, and Pro. Finishing a season in first place unlocks you more cars and more tracks, as well as the next difficulty. I managed to win my first season, and that was pretty fun. Each course feels quite different from the last, and there's a nice variety of locations you're taken to. There's also the Suicide Game mode, where you race in one direction while the other 3 drivers race the track in the opposite direction. It leads to some pretty cool challenges where you're avoiding all these cars. Still though, that was the mode I played the least. I was more interested in normal races and seasons. The graphics in this game are also great in my opinion. I love the particle effects when you drive through mud or water. It really gives that game the rally feeling of cars spraying up dirt and mud as they go through harsh turns. The music is, and I bet you were never guessing I'd say this, good but nothing special. It's fine enough, but nothing I'm going to search up and put on after the fact. The 2-player mode was also fantastic. You can do a single race or you can do the head-on mode where each player is driving in the opposite direction. My friend and I had the most fun with this mode. It's especially fun on the mines track, since that one is so much smaller than any of the others I had unlocked. The game also allows you to keep driving if you finish first, meaning you can have fun messing with the other player after you win. I don't know how the 4-player mode is, since I don't have 4 controllers or 4 people willing to play an old PS1 racer with me. Still, it was one of the common praise points of the game by critics, so I imagine it must have been pretty good. My only complaint is the physics. I feel like sometimes the cars would flip over too easily. My friend also agreed with me, although I know a sample size of 2 isn't very significant. But I don't know, sometimes it just felt like they'd flip over from like nothing. Not a huge issue, but a little annoying. But overall, I really enjoyed my time with Rallycross. I definitely recommend it to anyone watching if you want a nice little racer. I might actually go back and play this one more at some point. I sure as hell enjoyed it more than the next one, that's for sure. Why? So Cheesy is one of those few games I actually managed to recognize while going through the Classics of Game catalog. The first time I heard about this game was that old Kid Icarus video from, Jesus, a decade ago? Needless to say, I was not happy to see Cheesy again. What was once just an object of ridicule was now something I actually had to contend with playing, and I was not looking forward to it. I actually played Game 6 first because I really just did not want to play Cheesy. I mean, can you blame me? Look at this FMV. What the fuck is that? Ew. Cheesy was published in 1996 by Ocean Software and developed by CTA Developments. CTA was formed in 1991 by artist Richard Cheek, along with programmer John Scott. Before Cheesy, the studio made 2D platformers for Super Nintendo and home computers. These were somewhat well received, at least better than Cheesy would be, which was received terribly. So terribly, in fact, that CTA Developments would close down as a result, the developers hopefully going on to work on something better than Cheesy. As a matter of fact, John Scott went on to work for Raven Software on games like Heretic 2 and Soldier of Fortune. What a weird career path, Cheesy to Soldier of Fortune. Anyway, once you pass the title screen, you're dumped into this hub world, and if you watch the clip, you already know the deal. Weird-ass tank controls. And you know what? Here's my brave, controversial opinion for this video. I don't mind the tank controls. Sure, the momentum is absolutely fucked, but that's a problem with the whole game, not just the tank controls part. We'll get to that in a second. These controls are only in the hub world anyway. At most, you only have to do a couple small jumps and boxes and that's it. I'm mostly acclimated to it, problems with the momentum aside. Honestly, the real fucked up movement is inside the levels themselves. It's not as bad in this first one, but it's still noticeable. It gets way worse in other levels where the game actually gets difficult though. Something I noticed in this first level is that the camera is a little too close for my comfort. There are a few times during the game where the camera fucked me over. You also get the gun in this level when Cheesy watches this alien absolutely get their shit wrecked. Why are there aliens in this game, by the way? They kind of just feel thrown in. They don't match the whole evil castle or mad scientist thing at all. That's the plot of this game, by the way. Cheesy gets kidnapped by a mad scientist in an evil castle, but he hears about a teleport spell he can use to get out. This whole game is this confusing mix of aesthetics. The villain is a mad scientist, but he does spells and lives in an evil castle, and there's aliens also. I guess the devs just put whatever the hell they wanted in here. One thing that I actually do like about this game is the amount of variety. A lot of the levels are unique, although they do reuse a couple level types. Something I did notice though is that 3 of these level types are just press left or right dodge in time. Kind of lame. I also think it's funny that they ripped off Snot a Problem from Earthworm Jim, except it's way easier since you can just shoot the boss and it's over in like 30 seconds. Graphically, this game leaves a lot to be desired. The FMV is particularly cheap looking, only ever lasting a few seconds and often weirdly lit. The game is very brown overall, and isn't particularly visually interesting to me. There's just so many different locations you could do for a dual spooky castle / mad scientist laboratory, and they just do nothing with it. These tubes are the most creative it gets, but for the most part it's this dingy castle. Cheesy himself also just looks ugly. What's up with those tiny little eyes? Ugh. One thing to note is the skybox on the roof kinda goes hard. I really like the vivid colors and how the moon looks here. In terms of the music, I actually like it a lot. Some of it is pretty neat, like the rooftop theme especially. Music aside though, Cheesy just isn't a very good game. Its movement in particular really kneecaps it. One interesting thing is that the Japanese version actually makes the game a lot more tolerable. Among many things, one change it makes is that Cheesy walks by default and Run has been put on buttons. If I was rating these games out of 10, this alone would bring up the score by 1, that's how big of a deal this is. The Japanese version also fixes the absolutely fucked up password screen. In the European version, the password screen is letter-based and goes by so damn fast that you have to fiddle around with it to actually type anything. In the Japanese version, passwords are based on the face buttons, a much simpler solution. They also gave Cheesy bigger eyes, making him look less shitty. It's a good change, I think. Still, Japanese Cheesy goes from bad to just mid. It's still got the same weird FMV and drab look. But why did Cheesy turn out so bad exactly? I think there's 2 reasons. One was that they were actually developing for Atari Jaguar for at least a year. I have no idea if the Jaguar version was an additional platform or if it was the main platform and they ended up switching to PlayStation, but either way, a year of what would turn out to be lots of wasted work cannot have helped make Cheesy any better of a game. Things also make a little more sense when you look at CTA's previous games too. It's all simple 2D stuff, while Cheesy is 3D and has a lot of gameplay variety. All things considered, Cheesy must have been a fairly ambitious project for this studio. Too bad they couldn't really handle it if the final product is anything to go by. But who knows, maybe Cheesy would have turned out bad regardless of all this stuff. There's no real way to tell. All I know is it's a bad game now and I won't be playing it again. Yeah, a game about racing trucks, how about that? And these aren't just any trucks. Decoration trucks, or Decotora, are heavily customized Japanese trucks. LEDs, giant murals, custom horns, anything they can change has been changed. These trucks cost a ton of time and money to make, in the territory of potentially hundreds of millions of yen. Although initially only found in fishing villages, Decotora spread across the country in the 70s after the release of the movie Toraku Yero, alongside another bump in popularity in the 90s. Nowadays, though, the Decotora is an increasingly endangered species in Japan, with tighter and tighter regulations on modifications to trucks every year. So that's Decotora. Sounds like a pretty neat idea to make a game about, to be honest. I can imagine customizing your truck could be pretty fun. Art Camion Geijutsuden was published and developed by TYO Corporation, a big media conglomerate in Japan. They had a video game development division at some point, although it closed in the 2000s. Art Camion was never released outside of Japan, and there's no fan translation either, so get your translator ready if you want to play this. I couldn't find a whole lot of information about the developers or the game's reception, at least not in the English-speaking internet. Presumably it was received well enough to get a sequel the following year, titled Art Camion Sugurokuden. Weirdly enough, the sequel seems to completely abandon the previous gameplay style. Instead, it's presumably based on a Japanese board game Suguroku. I don't know, this one doesn't look as good as Geijutsuden. It looks kinda cheap, honestly, and the trucks aren't even decorated, which is like the whole point. But enough about that, let's get back to the first game. It opens with this really nice FMV cutscene, way better than Firo and Klawd's. I mean, really, look at this stuff, it's incredible. The shot of the dragon flying alongside the truck is super memorable and unique. In this game, you compete head-to-head with another truck driver to see who can complete their route the fastest. The game automatically steers for you, so it's up to you to accelerate, brake, and change lanes. You can also honk and scream to make other cars speed up or get out of the way. The other cars on the road serve a pretty interesting role in gameplay. You'll mainly be avoiding the other cars on the road. However, things change up when you get in the lead, and you can use the cars to your advantage to control the lanes and prevent the other driver from getting ahead. It brings a very nice dynamic element to the game, upping the complexity a little bit. Since neither of you are exactly going race car speeds, considering you're in semi-trucks, the two of you are constantly neck and neck. Races are often tense, with your competitor almost never letting up for more than a few seconds. There were quite a few times when I only finished first by the skin of my teeth. My one complaint about the gameplay is that the races are long. Each is around 3 to 4 minutes long, since they like to play an entire song while you race. Losing a race kinda feels like a kick in the nuts, since you just spent 4 whole minutes racing. I suppose in some ways it does add more stakes, but for me it just kind of made things more frustrating more than anything. Either way, the gameplay is a lot of fun. If you win the race, you'll get a reward of AP, with a little subtracted based on how much cargo you lost via taking damage. This is where the best part of the game comes in. You can spend AP and items to customize your truck, and let me tell you, the customization in this game is fantastic. There are so many different murals, parts, lights, just so much stuff to put in your truck. You can even change little stuff like the sound of the horn or the pattern of the LEDs or the interior of the cab. The customization aspect was by far my favorite part of the game. It was fun doing a mission and getting to use the points to further customize my truck bit by bit. It goes from a boring gray box to something uniquely yours. You can buy additional trucks with different stats too, so you have multiple trucks to work with, meaning you can really experiment. Weirdly enough, this game scratches the same itch for me as Armored Core. Something about the loop of short missions into going to the shop and upgrading feels really similar to AC. I know that statement kinda gives guy who's only seen Boss Baby watching his second movie vibes, but I think in particular the damaged cargo comes out of your paycheck thing really contributes to it. That's just like how your bullets and repair costs come out of your paycheck in Armored Core. Anyway, the desire to have a cool truck isn't really the only thing that motivates you. There's also a story mode that I could sort of understand using Google Translate. You play as a new employee at a trucking company. The game starts with meeting your fellow employees, but soon the correspondent you've been talking to delivers some bad news. A rival trucking firm, the Reaver Group, has been doing so well that your trucking firm is in danger of going out of business, so it's up to you to take your Decotora racing skills and beat the competition. The dialogue seemed to be simple enough that Google Translate could pick up on it and interpret most of it, and when it got a little hairy, I could figure out what it was trying to say anyway. It's a nice little bit of extra motivation on top of the main drive to customize your truck. There's also a side story mode with at least 2 side stories you can participate in, although I never unlocked the second one. These follow a visual novel format, with small bits of gameplay interspersed between segments. The first one has a romantic tone, with you literally bumping into a childhood friend, and I swear to God they used the most cliché sound effect for your character catching feelings. Also, the second time you meet her, you bump into her again, just so they can reuse the CG, which I thought was kind of funny. I didn't explore this mode too much, since I'm not about to read a visual novel through Google Translate. That would be like reviewing a restaurant's food after you reheated it in the microwave. There's also a 2-player mode and a time attack. I played the time attack off camera and it was nothing special really. The 2-player is fun, although it's not perfect. I like that you can import your own trucks from your save file, but I honestly wish they could have just let you have a free customized mode for this. My friend obviously didn't have a truck of their own, so we just used the same one. There's also only 3 tracks to choose from, which is a little lame, because I know the game has more than 3 kinds of scenery. None of the 2-player tracks were at night either, meaning you can't show off the cool lights on your truck at all in Versus. The graphics in this game are really great, really embodying those classic PS1 vibes. I love all the different scenery that passes by as you drive. They could have easily made the road look the same the whole time, but there's buildings, divided highways, rivers, all sorts of stuff. And lastly, the music. This game's music is great. All the instrumental themes are pretty great, first of all. I really like the shop theme in particular. But the real standout stuff plays when you're actually driving. These amazing, wistful vocal tracks play as you drive through the highways of Japan. The songs really sell that feeling of being in for the long haul as the sun sets as you drive to your destination. I'm pretty sure it even displays the lyrics at the bottom of the screen, which is a nice touch. All in all, Camion Geijutsuden is a fantastic game, even for someone who can't read the language it's in. I heavily recommend it. I'd love to see it get a translation someday. There's a lot of these Decotora games actually. I managed to find 5 other ones. Honestly, I should make a video on them at some point. Let me know if you'd actually want that. I'm really happy we ran into something like this so quickly. I was hoping I'd find games like this when I started this series, weird games with a lot of personality that happen to be actually pretty good. What a neat little game. I don't usually gravitate towards NES games anyway, but when I was researching the developers of this game and found out that 3 of their other games are featured on Angry Video Game Nerd, my heart sank. Ghoul School was released in 1992 for the NES. Its developers, Imagineering Incorporated Games, were founded in 1986 and didn't make much of note, besides some Simpsons games for the NES that, as I said before, ended up on the Angry Video Game Nerd. Ghoul School is relatively obscure, so I couldn't find anything about how it was received at the time. Nowadays, however, it seems to be agreed upon that it's pretty bad. I found an interview of Ghoul School's programmer and designer, Scott Marshall. From what he says in the interview, it seems the game was originally intended for Game Boy and was instead put on the NES by Imagineering. Scott speaks of multiple things the team wanted to do, but ultimately couldn't due to the system's hardware limitations, so I have to wonder if other aspects of the game were affected by the limitations as well. Looking at this manual using this kinda crusty PDF, we find the story. You're a high schooler named Spike who goes to Ghoul School High. One day he finds a big glowing skull in the cemetery and decides to take it with him to anatomy class. You know, just a bit of casual grave robbery. It'll be fine. He still thinks it's fine, even though the skull literally grows twice as big overnight. Unfortunately, the skull calls out to the forces of evil to invade the school. It's up to Spike to save everyone, including his crush, the head cheerleader. Pretty okay story. It's a good setup, and I've seen more obnoxious stuff in terms of the actual writing of stories and game manuals. Unfortunately, the actual game isn't as good. The whole game is you wandering through the school to beat the bosses and eventually find the final boss. And by wandering, I really mean it. If you don't make your own map or have a walkthrough, you're fucked. This game is a complete maze. The very first place you're supposed to go is like 5 screens away at least. To make things worse, there's dead ends in these borderline useless classrooms that only contain some enemies and a health item. The whole time you're wandering around, you'll hear this super short music loop. It's catchy at first, but then it starts getting on your nerves after a while, especially when you've been wandering around the school with no clue where to go. Graphically, I don't know, it's an NES game. In my opinion, it's not going to look very good unless it's made by one of the best developers of the time. I don't have a whole lot of NES experience outside of big name franchises, so I don't know what the average one from 1992 should look like. I think the monster sprites all look pretty good, but the character sprites look a little weird. Then again, apparently the photo of the high school's exterior took up a major amount of space for sprites, so maybe they just didn't have the space for more detailed sprites. In terms of gameplay, the game is pretty lackluster. You start out with this bat that has like 0 range, so you have to get right up close to the enemies. Luckily, a lot of the enemies are brain dead, so it's not too hard to beat them, but there's a few like these guys that throw their head that are nearly impossible to defeat with the bat. There are also these little red assholes you can find scurrying around some of the rooms. There's no ducking, so you can't hit them at all, so they're free to chip away at your health. And it's not like you can jump over them easily either. It's hard to turn around quickly, because when you just tap the D-pad, you only take a little baby step, and it's way too little of a distance to avoid the eyeball when you jump. There are some spots where you can kill them, like if you're on the stairs, but for the most part they might as well be invincible. You get more weapons later, like this towel with more reach and attack, or these special ghost guns. The first one I got, the Deweytron, was nice because it was ranged, but on the flip side it did piss poor damage. You're telling me a teenager snapping a towel does more damage than this advanced weapon? No wonder the manual said the town's Ghostbusters got their asses kicked, they were using fucking Nerf guns. I only played an hour of this game. I gave up around this part of this green guy. His iframes last forever and he kills me in 2 hits, so I'm fucked. The Deweytron barely does any damage to him, and the towel means I have to get close and he kills me. I'm betting what I probably had to do is find a better weapon somewhere, but I didn't want to go wandering back through the school again. My minimum hour was already up, so I was just out of there. Overall, Ghoul School was not a fun time. I think I can see what the developer was going for, but ultimately it was a bit too ambitious for the NES. If the developer interview is anything to go off of. In order to talk about the next game, we need to talk about a unique PlayStation, a special all-black PlayStation named the Net Yorose. The Net Yorose was basically a consumer-grade PlayStation dev kit. For $750, you could have a region-unlocked PlayStation that could plug directly into your PC. From there, you could use the included software and reference books to develop your own games on the PlayStation hardware. There was also a forum made to share Net Yorose games and development kits. Many games were made with the Net Yorose. Some were even released on demo discs with PlayStation Magazine. Pretty neat, having the work of amateur developers placed alongside demos of professional games. As a matter of fact, games still occasionally get developed with the Net Yorose to this day. I've seen a few Net Yorose jams that ran in the past 5 years, so the community is still alive and well to some degree at least. One Net Yorose developer, Mitsuru Kamiyama, even went on to work for Square Enix after his impressive work on the adventure game Terra Incognita as part of Team Fatal. He would go on to do the programming for Crystal Chronicles and still works there to this day. But actually, before Terra Incognita, Team Fatal had another smaller release. 1997 saw the release of Fatal Fantasy VII. As far as I can tell, it serves as a short showcase of the team's abilities. I will admit, before we begin, I've never played Final Fantasy VII, so while I tried to pick up on as many references as I could, there's probably something I missed or some joke I didn't get. When you get into this game, you get these stars in a void parodying the very opening shot of 7. You get this little text explaining that the corporation Zenra, a pun on Shinra meaning completely naked, has taken over the world's supply of toilet paper. Our protagonist, Proud, needs to take a crap. Then I'm pretty sure below are 2 puns that didn't really translate well. I gotta say, when you actually get into the game, the pre-rendered bathroom looks quite nice. Really well detailed too, with the poster on the wall, the rays of light shining through the window, and the bucket on the ground. Although, Cloud's looking a little... Unfortunately for our hero, there's no toilet paper anywhere. Even worse, a couple of Zenra soldiers are here now too. Those bastards are lucky they only have to piss. Outside is this absolutely incredible pre-rendered background. If they wanted to flex their art skills, they succeeded. Going through the door, we arrive at yet another incredible pre-rendered background. The soldier here attacks us, and the demo ends right before the fight. The one complaint I have is that there's a lot of dead air in this. They probably didn't have a music guy on the team yet though, so if that's the case, then it's understandable. Still, some sort of ambient sound would be nice, you know, something to break up the suffocating silence. But overall, for what it's trying to be, I think Fatal Fantasy succeeds. It's a nice showcase for the developers of Terra Incognita. Also, man, that second screen goes hard. Abob, also sometimes referred to as Airbob, is another Net Yorose game. It was released in 1998, and that's basically all I can find about it. It was developed by these mysteriously initialed people. The source in Wikipedia just links back to a college newspaper with no info about the authors. There's really not a lot of consistent coverage over the Net Yorose, especially behind the scenes stuff like developers of the games. Airbob is a small bobsledding game. There are 6 teams to choose from, all of different stats. Once the clock starts, you mash square to get the bobsled going, then you're off on the course. You'll awkwardly bounce around if you don't hold the D-pad, although you'll still bounce around a little bit even when you're doing the steering. Once you reach the end of the course, you jump off a huge ramp and skydive to victory. You do a few tricks by pressing the right buttons and you land and get your score. The graphics in this game are pretty cute. All the teams are nicely differentiated and they have these nice logos as well. Also, the game's sharp curves actually do it a favor as it sort of masks the pop-in since it's off camera. There's no music, which is a little disappointing. Some classical music maybe would have been nice or something. I'm pretty sure you can put that in without paying anyone, and something fast-paced would be fitting enough, but it's understandable if they didn't want to put that in. Also, during the skydiving section, there's a weird delay at the spots where there's spaces in between the buttons. It feels really weird, and the second time I was playing I accidentally messed up and died. But overall, I enjoyed my brief time with Abob, or Airbob, I don't know. I can only wonder what these people would go on to do later. Did they even keep doing game development, or were they just hobbyists? If someone out there does actually know, let me know in the comments. This one was a little tough to track down since it turns out there's no official download link anymore. I had to go to CNET to get this game. Felt gross going there, like I shouldn't be there. You better like and subscribe. I went to fucking CNET for this video. I did some quick research and it turns out this game was developed by J-Star Lab. Their website now just displays an ad for the modern version of this game on Steam. The Steam version is, as of writing, unreleased. Using the Wayback Machine, I looked at the history of their website. The website and the game were both first created in 2004. According to the website, the game was programmed by Benoit Chapereau and the art was done by Eric Breistrofer. The website also shows what Benoit went on to do after the game. Around 2011, the website changed and was now dedicated to Benoit's new game, Motocross High Definition, or MXHD. This game was available on Windows and Xbox 360 and later on the App Store. Later in 2016, the website changed once again to be an advertisement for a Unity physics engine known as The Force, later renamed to the OK Dynamics engine in 2024. Pretty humble to call it just OK. I was wondering if the physics were going to be super good in the game because of this. Then, in 2025, J-Star Lab was renamed to Shanghai Chapereau Science and Technology Co., Limited, which is the name listed under Motocross The Force on Steam. Fast forward to late 2025 and the website turns into what we know now. But enough about the website, let's get into the game. I found this game to be pretty frustrating. Talking about what I liked first, the bikes and riders are very well modeled. Also, there's 25 different tracks to choose from, with slightly varying scenery to spice things up a bit. The ragdoll physics are also a big highlight of this game. Your guy goes absolutely flying sometimes when you crash, and it's honestly hilarious, at first anyway. But that leads into what I don't like. You crash constantly, and I don't think it's just because I'm bad at this game. This guy will not stay on his fucking bike. Even the AI crashes and falls off. There are multiple times when every single racer would crash, me included. And turning felt impossible. I've tried slowing down, I tried using WASD to lean into my turns, nothing worked. I'd always end up overshooting and accidentally riding the wall. Maybe I'm just bad and I can't figure out the actual way you do it, but I could just not turn. It was basically impossible for me to keep up with the racers. My goal just became simply finishing the race, at which point I realized the game goes on forever and there's no lap limit. I guess a counterpoint to these complaints is that motocross games are apparently expected to be pretty tough. If that's the case, then it makes sense I'd be terrible after only an hour into my first ever motocross game. So I guess accounting for that, take some of these criticisms with a grain of salt, considering they're from someone of no experience in the genre. Also, there's no music, just this weird engine sound that gets pitched up or down depending on how fast you're going. It sounds kinda weird in my opinion. Just to cap things off, there's an included track editor that just spits errors at me when I try to open it, so that's cool. But that might be because I'm on Windows 11. Overall, I didn't really have a good time with this one, but at the same time it's hard to say if that's because of the game itself or if I'm just not experienced enough of motocross games. On the bright side, I've seen a video showcasing a new version on Steam, and it seems like they've continued to improve, so good on them. I wish the developers the best of luck. But as for this version of the game, I didn't really enjoy my time, like I said. So you know what? I'm sick of racing. I'm out of here. See you later, losers. What the hell am I playing now? No way around it, this game is ass. Gas Girl is a Net-Eurose game made by Koji Yoshikawa. I know nothing else about him, his name returned pretty much nothing on Google. It's a platformer where you play as a girl who farts on stuff. I don't know if the developer was like into this or something, or if it's just typical 90s gross out humor. But either way, I don't really find farts particularly funny, so this game kinda just grosses me out. She gets kidnapped in her sleep by a whole bunch of assorted enemies, and you have to help her get out of this weird grass maze. The game is just kinda bad, honestly, even for Net Eurose standards. A lot of the enemies are on slopes, which means your farts don't exactly reach them properly, and it's really frustrating. Also, a lot of enemies just have a ton of health, which makes things even more annoying. Walking up the slopes that the enemies are on just slows you down, which is really annoying, because it's not like this is used in any puzzles or anything, it just makes you slower. It doesn't really sound like too much of a big deal at first, but like half the game is on slopes, so it makes it feel like you're wading through molasses for half the game. In terms of graphics, it's not really anything special. This isn't that unforgivable though, it's a solo dev creating stuff for Net Eurose, he's not going to have professional level modeling skills. There's also no music, again, just the occasional sparse sound effect and the weird sounding fart sound. Although, I don't know, I guess I'm glad they didn't use actual fart sound effects at least. Every time you die, you go back to the very start of the whole thing. This kind of annoyed me, especially in the section where you're supposed to fart upwards to propel these giant head things so you can pass. It got so annoying that I just gave up early because I kept having to go through this section. I wasn't going to waste any more of my precious time on Earth on Gas Girl. Sorry, but this one just has a really weird, gross premise and it's not very fun to actually play. I did not like it.
Come on.
StoneGate is a PlayStation 1 fighting game developed on the Net Eurose. It was developed by F. Javier Ventosa Regosa. I couldn't find much else about Regosa, as that seems to be a fairly common name. I did find another homebrew PlayStation game he worked on, a puzzle game called Catharsis, which I can't find footage of, and whoever uploaded the ROM didn't upload in a format I can seem to use with my emulator. I know I said I couldn't review the little nuances in the gameplay of fighting games, but I think I can make an exception for this one. StoneGate is extremely bare bones. Even the author himself admits it when you press info. I would have liked a guide to the controls or the power-ups, but I guess an apology works too. By his admission, there's no jumping, no options, no magic, no one-player mode, and no music. They said they ran out of time, that they only had 12 weeks. 12 weeks for what? I'm not sure. Maybe it was made for a Net Eurose competition, or maybe they only had access to the Eurose through a college or university and their course was ending. Either way, it's a shame. It seems crunch development cycles come for even the smallest developers. As for the game itself, like I said, bare bones. Me and my friend couldn't figure out any special moves or anything, so it's all button commands. There's punching and kicking and that's it. The gimmick of this game is that there's these two portals on each side of the arena. I'm not exactly sure what these add to the gameplay other than making it so that you can't really be backed into the corner. I'm honestly not sure what I'm supposed to say about this game. Yeah, it's bad obviously, but it's a homebrew PS1 game, potentially a student project made in 1998. The internet was way different, you couldn't just Google a coding problem back then. The graphics are fine enough. It looks sort of like an early PS1 game, which is pretty impressive for something made in 12 weeks. The music, like I said, doesn't exist, just dead air. Unlike Fatal Fantasy at least though, there is sound effects, so there is that. Also, for some reason, the health bars didn't show for us and the power-ups didn't work, so we just had to blindly duke it out until I got knocked out. Altogether, StoneGate would be a bad game by normal game standards, but I can't judge it like a normal game, can I? An amateur fighting game made in 12 weeks cannot be meaningfully compared to something like Tekken or Street Fighter, at least not in my opinion. It's part of the reason why I haven't given any of these games a numerical score. So for what it is, I like StoneGate fine enough. It's probably someone's university project or hobby project or something. I certainly couldn't develop anything in only 12 weeks, at least they were dedicated enough to create something. This was a surprisingly not obscure pick for Classics of Game. Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver 2 is an adventure game released for PlayStation 2 and PC. It was published by Eidos and developed by Crystal Dynamics. Crystal Dynamics first made it big with Gex, then with the Legacy of Kain series. Soul Reaver 2 is the third game in the series out of 6, after Blood Omen and the first Soul Reaver. Just to get this out of the way first, I recommend buying the remaster of Soul Reaver 1 and 2 if you want to play this game. The old PC port has numerous issues that need to be fixed via installing a fan patch. The PS2 version requires an actual console, as I ended up finding out the hard way the game doesn't play nice with PCSX2, despite the wiki saying otherwise. It says it's playable, but at about 20 minutes in it completely breaks for me, despite being on the latest version of the emulator at the time. But, like I said, it's not a huge issue because the remaster is a thing. As for the game itself, these games actually have a really good storyline. I recommend watching recaps or playing them for yourself if you find yourself interested in the story at any point. There's also a recap and a manual for this one, although it's a bit rushed. For a very brief recap, Legacy of Kain takes place in a world called Nosgoth, which has slowly been decaying because of these magical pillars being corrupted. Kain, a legendary vampire, rules over much of the land, has many lieutenants, one of which is named Raziel. Raziel ends up ascending to a higher form of vampire, growing wings, but this sparks Kain's jealousy as he wanted to be the first to evolve. Angered, he breaks Raziel's wings and casts him into a whirlpool, as vampires are weak to water in this universe. Raziel endures 500 years of torture until he's pulled out of the vortex by the world's elder god and given a new horrific form. With this new form, he is given the ability to consume souls in a mission to track down and kill Kain, who has corrupted the world even more over the past 500 years. Along the way, Raziel binds with a special sword known as the Soul Reaver that destroys souls. To make a long story short, Raziel eventually finds Kain fiddling with the controls of a time machine. During their confrontation, Kain activates the time machine and flees into the past, with Raziel falling close behind. The first Soul Reaver ends right there. The second picks up immediately afterwards. Raziel meets Mobius, the Guardian of Time. They have a little spat since Mobius has a reputation for being a liar. However, Raziel calms down a bit when Mobius reveals Kain's location to him, although he still doesn't trust him completely. After upgrading the Soul Reaver a little bit, Raziel tracks Kain to the Pillars, right at the moment the Pillars are corrupted by the murder of one of their guardians. Kain convinces Raziel not to kill him on the spot, talking about things like uncovering Raziel's destiny at the base of the Pillars. Raziel goes inside a nearby temple leading to the base of the Pillars, finding a series of murals depicting blue angelic beings somewhat similar to him, although without the whole jaw thing. He also finds the Elder God at the base of the Pillars, who tells him not to trust the murals. Raziel is like, nah, and goes to find more secrets. Granted, this is a very truncated recap. I'd recommend either playing these games yourself or watching these two videos for recaps, which are in the pastebin links in the description. The story and writing is honestly the best part of this game. Even just listening to recaps of the story was interesting. The writing and voice acting are both fantastic. The script is great and the performances are from experienced theater actors. Just watching these characters talk to each other is incredibly entertaining.
The path you have been treading is open to only one being. You don't know what you are, do you?
I have been many things. If you find me ignorant, enlighten me.
What's the point? This world is beyond redemption. Let the human cattle have it.
I would expect better than meek capitulation from you.
Centuries of persecution have taught me well.
The music is also great, nice orchestral tracks that provide fitting ambience and tone. There's also a neat musical effect when you switch between the material and spectral planes. The spectral plane distorts the music, which I thought was really cool. Graphically, I think the game is quite nice. It doesn't go for strict photorealism, so the visuals still hold up to some degree. I particularly like the look of the spectral realm, especially the transition from realm to realm. Corridors and pillars shift into form when you transition to spectral, really selling that feeling of being in a messed up mirror of the world. Unfortunately, there's one thing that I really ended up disliking: the gameplay. Your time is mostly split between combat and puzzles, with some light platforming sprinkled in between. The puzzles are just okay, it's no Portal or Talos principle, but it's good enough for an adventure game. It's stuff like, go here and redirect this mirror, go there and open this door of this element. Like I said, fine enough for an adventure game. Exploration is also a good time, although I did find myself getting lost a few times, since I'll be the first to admit I don't have the greatest sense of direction. Also, sometimes it's not entirely clear that you can interact with certain things, leading me to wandering around until I caved in and checked the walkthrough, only to find I had to push a block out of a dimly lit corner or something. I won't give nearly as much praise to the combat. It started out passable, but by the end of my 5 hours I was groaning whenever enemies showed up. You can do a light or heavy attack as well as a low kick. And for defense you have blocking and dodging. Enemies drop souls, which you can feed on to get more health. You could also activate the Soul Reaver to do more damage, although it instantly consumes the souls of your enemies, leaving none for you to feed on. Additionally, using the Soul Reaver too much will cause it to start leeching off your soul, draining your health bar. Attacks feel like they have proper weight, and everything has nice feedback. There's also nice visual variation in all the different weapons you can pick up, and some of them have slightly differing ranges. At first I thought it was simple but fine enough for an adventure game. The story, puzzles, and exploration can carry me through to simply passable combat, right? But that didn't really turn out to be the case. There's a lot of combat in this game, and it's all with enemies that, for the most part, feel the same. There's some variation with ranged enemies or these women with battle axes, but for the most part the combat will boil down to the same loop. Basically, the game's combat lacks a whole lot of variation. It feels like there should be more types of enemies with different attack patterns, but the most you get is enemies with different skins and different looking weapons you can pick up after the fact. Sometimes enemies would fly up in the air, almost like a cue to juggle them a la Devil May Cry. There's no conceivable option to follow up on that, yet it felt to me like there should be. Instead, you just wail on them with light and heavy attack a bunch and dodge a little until they stand there panting and you decapitate them or impale them. It was so rinse and repeat by the time I was done that I can't fathom trying to play through this entire game. Maybe you unlock new abilities that give you extra moves later in the game, but for the 5 hours I played, the combat really wore on me. My breaking point was this combat encounter right here. I already wasn't playing the best because I was worn out. I wanted to quit and keep playing another time, but this game's save points are very sparse, and it had been hours since I last saved. I didn't remember you got to be standing still to throw your weapon, so I had to use this shitty sword against these Forge Guardians instead of the Reaver. Meanwhile, in the background are 3 ranged enemies constantly sending projectiles at you. Did I mention I was trying to avoid losing all my health and going into Spectral because I had the darkness element applied to the Reaver? The elements are used for solving puzzles and unlocking doors, but you lose them when you go into Spectral. So I really couldn't afford to die unless I wanted to trudge through the Forge's overly large corridors all the way back to the fountain thing. I couldn't go back very far either because the game just respawns enemies I fought 30 seconds ago, and then I had to fight them too. I finally cleared out everything, only to find out the puzzle object you get from clearing this encounter isn't usable yet since I did things out of order. So I wander around the Forge a little annoyed, but hey, at least I cleared out that combat encounter now instead of later, right? Well, on my way I naturally got lost again, and ended up back in the same corridor leading back to the fight. And guess what? All the enemies respawned, including the ranged ones. At that point I just alt F4'd. The story beats are too few and far between for me to push through the gameplay, which is a shame since it's very interesting. I don't think I care enough to come back to it, to be honest. Overall, Soul Reaver 2 is technically a very solid, well-made game, but my time with it wasn't particularly standout because the gameplay just wasn't that fun to me. Kinda hurts to say with how interesting the story is. I figure 13 games is plenty for this video. It was a nice, varied slate of games. Some of them were pretty good, some were alright, and a few were awful. But all in all, I had a fun time making this video, and I can't wait to make more. I noticed a lot of these games are on the PlayStation 1 in this year in particular. Don't worry, it gets more varied even during the second half of 2011. If I had to pick any of these games to recommend, I'd probably recommend Rallycross and Camion Geijutsuden. If you're curious and you want something weird, Firo and Klawd or the Net Your Rose games are also worth taking a peek at. Avoid cheesy like the plague though. I hope you'll join me next time when I take a look at the rest of the clips from 2011. As for now, I'll just be customizing the truck.